There's always just been this desire deep within my soul to just not work for the man.
Knowing an adult who is making a living as an artist was essential for me to see, oh, you can do this. You can live in a nice area of California with a nice house as a professional artist.
When finally the universe was like, you're meant to make art, and I had so much love and so much passion for it, and it was just like in my veins, and I just knew that this is 100% what I'm supposed to do.
I just need to commit to this. I just need to be an artist and everything's going to work out. Just trust in this.
Another huge moment for me where I was like, wait, I can sell my art. Wait, I can do this and like be at festivals and be working and also like show in galleries.
It's almost like a spiritual practice of just believing that the universe is going to support you in ways you can't imagine. And that even though I may feel batshit crazy at times, like this is the path I should be on, and that life will come in and show me abundance in a way I could have never have fathomed.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Creativity and Consciousness podcast. I just finished up the Bali Painting in Paradise retreat with Shannon Miguela and Luke Brown, and it was a really incredible experience. I'm feeling really lit up and charged by that experience, but also a bit exhausted. It was a lot of work over a lot of months, and it's a lot to take care of 15 people over the course of 2 weeks and to nurture people's creativity as much as possible, but it's also immensely rewarding. And so today I'm going to share one of the highlights of the retreat, which was a panel discussion that I had with 4 other artists besides myself, actually. Luke Brown, Shannon Miguela, myself, as well as Izzy Ivy and Gage Kelsey. And we talked about the business of art as well as the art of business and how that pertains to being a professional entrepreneur and self-employed artist. And it's kind of ironic because it's Halloween. This has been the least Halloween I've ever had. It's usually my favorite holiday and I like to put a lot of energy into it, but I thought it was kind of funny because I think if you listen to all of my other podcasts, the ones I've posted recently, like the Aleister Crowley episode or about my experience doing ritual magic on psychedelics. These are all kind of spooky episodes that would fit really well within the theme of Halloween. And so every week has been Halloween themed up to this point. This is definitely the least Halloween related episode that I've done so far, seeing as we're really just talking about how we navigate the ups and downs of business as a artist and not so much about paranormal experiences. Although there is certainly a spiritual current that runs through the discussion. But I thought it was interesting that, and kind of funny, that today for the Halloween special episode, I'm actually making an exception to post a non-Halloween episode, just this once. And all the other episodes that go on into the future will be more spooky, I promise. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this conversation. I was only able to get the first 25 minutes or so recorded on video. Unfortunately, my camera seemed to have died or something happened into the filming. I'm not quite sure what. I've kind of had a bit of frustration around trying to capture these conversations on video. I'm going to get that issue resolved when I do these podcasts into the future. I hope it doesn't detract too much from the conversation, and I hope that you still find this very valuable. I think it is an incredibly valuable talk that we could probably charge a lot of money for, but I'm really happy to put it out there for free to share what I know and for all the other artists to share what they know and to support your growth through listening to this podcast.
Welcome to the Creativity and Consciousness podcast, a space to explore the intersection of creativity, spirituality, and personal transformation. I'm your host, Jake Cobran, visionary artist, author, and your humble guide in the exploration of our consciousness. In each episode, we dive into ideas related to magic, visionary art, and alternative spirituality. I bring you conversations with leading thinkers and innovators to help us tap into our creative potential, expand our minds, and transform our lives. Whether you're an artist seeking inspiration, a spiritual seeker exploring new paths, or someone on a journey of self-discovery, this podcast is here to help unlock new possibilities and awaken our inner power. Let's journey beyond the ordinary. Welcome to the Creativity and Consciousness Podcast.
So, we're going to talk business. Yeah. Because we're very professional people.
So yeah, this is just sort of a free-form jam out on the business of art, which is, a very important part of being an artist. How can you make that not only your vocation, but also your source of income, and how can you live in such a way that you can make art full time? I think these are all important questions that we've all asked ourselves. And so I think there's a million ways to do that. No two artists' careers look the same. There's so many different ways to do it. And so I guess I thought we could all just share like different things that we've learned throughout our journey of being professional artists and navigating the ups and downs and challenges of that to build a thriving life around making art. And so I guess I wanted to ask each person here first to start, just like, how did you start making money through your art? Like, what was the journey that took you to a place where you first started earning money through your art and creativity? So we can kind of round table that.
So the first painting I ever sold was on Fish Lot when I was very young, teenager. And that was the first time I realized I could like sell my artwork. I was just really entranced by the culture and the energy. And so I did a portrait of Trey, who's the guitarist, and someone saw it and they immediately bought it off me. And in that moment, I realized like, okay, I can do this. I can sell my art. So I started out doing like portraits, pet portraits, things that people wanted. And then eventually I started making my own artwork, and that was natural in the way that I was like just kept the momentum going and making my own artwork, and eventually started to sell my pieces as well. But that was like the moment I realized I could do it. That was like the full question, like when, like how it happened. Yeah. I have so much to share about my journey, but I'm just going to start there and keep passing it along.
So yeah, I really got into making art when I was like a preteen, painting like Warhammer figurines. And so my first experiences selling art were painting and selling Warhammer figurines on eBay for like $60 or something. And that was just a fun thing that I did because I saw other people doing it, like, oh, you can sell these things. And so I did that. And I remember the first piece of real art that I ever sold was some pencil drawing that I had made on the internet, or I had made and posted on the internet, and somebody reached out to me wanting to buy it, and I sold this pencil drawing for like $150 when I was like 15 years old or something. And that was really exciting for me that somebody was interested in owning a work of art of mine. And then when I was in high school, I was in the metal scene in San Francisco and connected with a lot of musicians that were in metal bands. So I started doing album covers and gig posters for different bands and t-shirt designs and sort of like, yeah, merch and album cover and poster designs for metal bands. And those were my first kind of like commission pieces when I was starting out. And when those were sometimes like $100 album covers or something, but at the time just making some money off my art was kind of a big deal and a way of starting to get my work in a more professional capacity. But in terms of like really selling fine art, I actually met my first art collector at Burning Man. I was spending time with this couple at Burning Man. We had like one night taken some medicine together and just spent like the entire night like walking through like Deep Playa, and we spent like 12 hours, the three of us together. and we really connected, and there was absolutely no like motivation behind that interaction. It was just like really natural, and we were just enjoying spending time with each other. And then after Burning Man, we stayed in touch, and they were like, you know, we're really moved by meeting you. We really want to support you. And so like, we want to buy one of your paintings. And so that was the first like big sale of a painting that I had. And I sold them one of my first pieces of like original psychedelic inspired art. And that was really, really, I was so grateful to have their support. And, you know, I don't need to necessarily disclose the exact amount, but it was a very large sum of money for me at the time. And it was very inspiring and motivating to feel like I could be supported to, you know, sell my art and make a living at it. So I'm really grateful for them to decide to be my first patrons.
Yeah, so I guess honestly I started my painting journey, it was kind of like 11, 12 years ago, but I've always been creative. So I was like trying to think like, okay, my first art sale, and I'm like, well, what art would there be? But like, just as a kid, I was just forever I've been making stuff. So I'm just like, I guess it was when I would go to like family gatherings and I'd make all these little figurine like things and just be like, hey, I made a thing. You know, it was just really like, I just liked making stuff and I was excited about it. And people saw that excitement and they wanted to, I don't know, give me like $1 for it or something. But my career kind of went more into clothing design for the duration of my 20s. And really it was a case of just being like, I was kind of really into fairies at the time. And I was working in a fairy store and they had kids stuff. And I was like, well, what if I make adult fairy costumes? And then they were really into that. And yeah, it was really just kind of like seeing where there were these little niches where people's like eyes sparked up. And you're like, oh, I don't know whether I was like destined to be like just a little bit entrepreneur. I mean, it's very much mixed in with the like Aquarian creativeness, which maybe like makes it seem like I'm not so much that way inclined. But yeah, there's always just been this desire deep within my soul to just not work for the man. I think deep down, even from like, yeah, my youngest awareness, I was like, I want to run my own business as a creative. And I didn't really know what that looked like. And it took quite a few years of fine tuning and actually figuring out what that looked like. And actually also realizing that sometimes the thing that you think is going to be really fun and really creative kind of kills your soul. And then you have to be like, wait, hang on. Am I still doing it for the reasons that I started this with? And kind of returning back to what really lights you up. And that's kind of what happened when I was 29, I guess. And I was just like, the clothing design was kind of killing my soul a little bit. I'm glad I did it. And sometimes I feel like, oh, I wish I'd got into painting earlier. But honestly, I trust in the process of the whole journey. And I learned so much, you know, like how to make websites and how to do inventory and invoices and taxes and all of that stuff. So when I did go into my creative, like when my art really took on its full power, you know, I had some kind of awareness around that. But also just life experiences. Yeah, on my first exhibition, someone asked me, why did you only just start painting now? And it was really just because I felt like I had something to communicate. So it was like the spiritual stuff that I'd been like delving into in my early adulthood was like priming the kind of the reason why I wanted to make art. So I think I'll probably just leave it there.
Curious. So yeah, I kind of always liked making art in school as a kid, and as I grew older and started experimenting with different things, I got really into jam bands, and really just the music of the Grateful Dead brought me to the psychedelic art scene, and then that really opened my mind. And so I kind of would make my own fan art kind of thing as a kid, and later as a high schooler and into uni. And at one point when I was maybe 20, I saw this band play at a party, and it was super awesome music. So I asked them if they ever needed an album cover, and they told me to come get on stage with them and make art. And this was before I'd ever heard of live painting. This is before I even painted. So I went to like the local shop. I bought a Sharpie pen and a flimsy poster board and got on stage and just started doodling. And I love their music. They were super cool guys. And they liked having me on stage. So I started doing that 2 to 3 times a week of just like going to different shows, getting on stage or being off stage next to it and just painting. And it was like the bar would give me 2 beers and I could make art. And then slowly someone's like, hey, I want to buy that for $50. Like, awesome. And then, you know, I just kept doing that for like maybe 3 or 4 years. And as I kept going, it turned into paint pens and then acrylic. And as the time went on, my skills got a little better. So it was like, okay, now it's $200 for whatever I did in a night. And I could start making prints at the local print shop for $1 or $2 and selling them for $20 or $15. So it was kind of just this like evolution, and my journey was really tied to the live music scene. And then when I moved to Austin, Texas, there wasn't too many people live painting there. So it's just this thing where every one of my friends were musicians. And kind of my way of hanging out with them was just to create art while they played. And over time, the paintings got better. I went to a workshop with Amanda Sage and learned some techniques. And eventually my paintings would be worth a few $100s. And I would start spending more time in each one, not just a one-off of the night. And in that time, I got a corporate gig and I worked that for maybe 2.5 years. And I had an existential crisis every morning. But I was a project manager for a company that my main client was Microsoft, and I managed like a 9 million person email program for them for marketing. It was fucking terrible, and I'm super dyslexic, so me and editing emails was not like ideal in life. But with that, I was able to save up some funds and then focus on just putting more time into my art. And I got to the point where I was like, what do I want to do with my time? Like, do I want to go out and be social, or do I want to create art? Do I want to be at this job, or do I want to like take the risk? And I think that's kind of where the evolution and the leaping point went for me. So yeah.
Sure. I'm having a memory of when I was 10, 11 years old. I was really into Fimo, working with polymer clay, and I wanted to just see how far I could take it. So I was taking photographs of my parents' friends and trying to make portraits of them out of Fimo, and then I'd end up presenting it to them, and they'd be like, wow, that's great. How much is it? I'd be like, $20. And then I'd be like, wow, I can't believe I sold that. So then I went through their own photo albums and did other ones of their friends, and then I'd present it to them, and they'd ask me how much it was. I'd say $30. And so I was basically creating a kind of entrapment to just make these sales for them. But yeah, when I was having my awakening experiences when I was a teenager, realizing that art was the direction I had to take, and I inherited a bunch of Zap comics. So there's like artists from the 60s that were doing all the poster art for the Grateful Dead, and that was a huge influence on me. And so I was surrounded by all these bands when I was in high school, and so I was doing all of their promo, their album covers, their posters for their gigs. And then once I was in college, I was also continuing this. I became kind of known for this kind of art, and so all that work that I was doing for outside of school that I was getting paid for, I was also handing in as my assignments for class and getting graded for it. So that was working out really well. And I lost the train of thought on that, but eventually that led into tattooing, but then came back to having to be solely supported for my art again, and just for like really putting my focus into my art and my painting, and just out of pure uncontrollable compulsion to be expressive. I've always seen this correlation of, just my imagination of myself and feeling the confidence that was instilled in me when I was a teenager, having this awakening that I just need to commit to this. I just need to be an artist and everything's going to work out. Just trust in this. I would find myself in just really unique situations and finding myself in, having these encounters with really incredible people that really recognized what I was doing and wanted to support me, and finding that I had most of my support through selling my original work, but then also having an application for that original work being applied to requests from clothing companies that were wanting to use it for shirts and for merchandise and getting royalties from that. So most of my income was coming from the sale of the originals, and then there'd be this residual, income from royalties. So that's really where most of my attention is now.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things there to go off of that I feel like are important. The first thing is that, as mentioned here, a lot of different forms of being able to sell art or to provide services as an artist that allow for different kinds of income. There's clothing design, jewelry design, the sale of original works, the sale of merchandise, the sale of prints, commissions, album covers, graphic designs, sculptures. Like, there's so many different things, murals, tattoos, like tattoo design, interior design, industrial design. Like, as a visual artist, there are so many different ways to earn money. Pet portraits, like so many different things that you can do. And I think that diversifying and exploring these different avenues can sometimes be helpful to just see what is going to provide, what people want, really. It's like you have to find that happy medium between what people want and what you enjoy doing. And that sweet spot is kind of like where the gold lies. And then Luke was talking about like making originals and then having the residual of merchandise or prints made from those originals. That's a really excellent thing to emphasize, because when you make an original work of art, if you get like a high definition photograph of that artwork, which I think is essential for every single artwork that you make, then you have the rights to that artwork. And even if you sell the original of it where you don't have access to the painting anymore, you now have that file that you can use to produce a million different artifacts that you could sell, including yoga mats, t-shirts, pillows, mugs, limited edition prints or not limited edition prints, NFTs theoretically, which is not really like doing very well these days, but that was a hype for a time. So there's all these things. And I guess also just to speak to my journey, Luke was talking about this sort of unwavering confidence and feeling that sort of inner confidence. My own confidence in making a living as an artist was supported by having exposure to professional artists when I was very young. So like one of my dad's best friends growing up was a professional artist. So I would go over to his house all the time and for different gatherings, and just like knowing an adult who is making a living as an artist was essential for me to see, oh, you can do this. Like you can live in a nice area of California with a nice house as a professional artist, and like my cousin, when I was also very young, like 10 years old, dated a concept artist that worked for Lucasfilms, was also making a good living as an artist. So I think like having exposure to these people when I was very young was really important for me to just be able to conceptualize in my mind, okay, you can make a living as an artist. There's a way to do that, and that was long before I ever heard about visionary art or anything like that. And just over time kept meeting people. Like when I was in the music scene, when I was younger, I went to a concert and there was this guy, David DeAndrea. He's an amazing screen print artist. He lives in, I think, Portland, Oregon. And he makes artwork for the band Ohm mostly, but he was selling prints that he had made, like hand screen printed posters that he was selling at the concert. And I talked to him and I was like, you can just do this. And he's like, yeah, you just need to send an email to the band and ask their permission. and then you can create gig posters and you can sell them. And so that was one of the first things that I started doing when I was a teenager, was approaching the bands that I loved that were touring and would come to San Francisco to play. I would make a poster design for that band and silk screen it, because I at the time I was doing like silk screen stuff, and then sell the posters. And they were all like a silk screen posters, all kind of, everyone's slightly different, so it's all like a unique original. And I would like sign and number them and then destroy the prints, making, I don't know what it's called, but like the stencils, the screen. Yeah, I would destroy the screen. And then so every single one of those was like a limited edition special thing, and that was super cool. It let me meet some of my favorite bands and also make a bit of money. Like there was always a split, like the band would take 50% or something, but it was really cool to have that first encounter and experience, and just to see like, oh, this is a way that you can do it as an artist, you know? So I guess if there's a question there, it's kind of like, so yeah, like what were your influences in terms of people that you saw that were doing it, that you were able to emulate or perhaps were inspired by?
I had an awakening at Sonic Bloom right before I went and moved to Colorado, seeing all these live painters. And I just started dabbling with figures and portraits. And I remember seeing Emily Kell, amazing artist in Colorado as well. And I saw a ton of artists there, but I'll never forget that moment when I saw her self-portrait and the energy of like everyone around it and her painting. And that was another huge moment for me, where I was like, wait, I can sell my art. Wait, I can do this and like be at festivals and be working, and also like show in galleries. And after that, I actually took my first workshop, my first like visionary workshop with Amanda Sage, and Emily Kell was hosting it too, but that's kind of how I found it. So I just started like connecting dots to like more and more artists, and like I didn't know anyone in the art scene at all, like artist wise. I was living in Salt Lake for like 7 years, going to school. I thought I was going to be an architect, and then I took physics, and I was like, there's no way I want anyone in or around a building that I would try and construct. No way. So I kept looking over the art building, and I was like, okay, that feels right to me. So I did go to art school. But yeah, I didn't know any like visionary psychedelic artists at all in our niche little scene. And so when I went to Sonic Bloom, I started diving into that. Then I started taking workshops, and that group of artists started to get bigger and bigger in terms of just like finding more artwork that I was drawn to. I took a workshop by C.T. Nelson, who's an amazing oil painter, like abstract surrealism. Oh my gosh, yeah, so amazing. And then all these artists I like really like looked up to, like still fangirl about, like started becoming my friends. And so taking the workshops, just continuing to like show up and be inspired by them, that connection started to grow as they saw like my, not just like my skills, techniques, but I just started showing up more, you know. And so yeah, it goes real deep in terms, like I probably saw like your artwork like so like at least like 10, not even, like maybe like 9 years ago. I started stepping into like just understanding that this scene existed like less than 12 years ago for sure. But I recently started coming into the scene like a couple years ago. So yeah, many years of looking up to my favorite artists, taking their workshops, and continuing to grow myself as an artist and finding my style through people that I admire as well.
It's an interesting one for me, because actually both my parents are artists, and they put me off being an artist, straight up. So they're based in the UK, and I was taken to a lot of different galleries throughout my life. And some of them were pretty amazing, but I do remember points when I was at on the edge of considering what my career might be, and I'd see some of this stuff, and like the Turner Prize would be like Tracy Emin's Unmade Bed, and I would just be like, wow, I don't know if art is, this just feels, I don't know, it didn't resonate. And it was a little bit disheartening. And I think there was a big part of me that did want to be a painter, but it just wasn't the place or the time, or there was something else. And it's kind of been interesting, like several years later, I wish I could just remind myself of a glimpse of that moment in time. And like essentially like the workshops that I'm sharing, it's called Anchoring Light, and the idea behind them is that when you look at the painting, you feel like a raise in frequency. You feel like inspired and uplifted when you look at these pieces of art. And I remember just, and I, you know, like so much art in the world, and it's so good to just make it no matter what headspace you're in. But there was just a point in my earlier life where I saw art that I looked at it and I felt the pain of that artist. And I was like, can art also be something else? Anyway, so there's been kind of like a personal journey with that. And my dad was more into kind of like the advertising side of things, which kind of put me off. And my mom was a teacher, which I saw how exhausted and how much of her soul she put in, how much of her own stuff she didn't do. So when finally the universe was like, you're meant to make art, and I had so much love and so much passion for it, and it was just like in my veins, and I just knew that this is 100% what I'm supposed to do. It was like, okay, well, it wasn't even the question of how can I do it different, but I just knew that I needed to find my own path with it. And I had no idea about visionary art or any movements that, you know, that I guess I'm sort of like co-weaved into these days. But really, I think that the turning point was just having someone say, here's some oil paints, go paint. I think he could just see like there was a little sparkle in my eye, or there was something that intuitively he knew that needed to happen. So yay for Tobias. Yeah, grateful for him. Just sort of, and just discovering, I think the first part was just like the lowbrow art, and I think I was exploring, I spent some time in Japan, and I was like inspired by the Harajuku girls there, and I started drawing, and then spirituality was wanting to mesh in, and anyway, it kind of like found its own cause. But essentially the biggest thing I want to say is just, and I'm slightly sidetracking, but it just feels important, it's not really artists that have inspired me, but spiritual teachers that have just reminded me to trust in the moments where you're like, how do I do this artist thing? You know, like the amount of just like throwing myself into things and knowing that if that's what I'm supposed to do, then the universe will kind of unfurl in my favor. I feel like that's kind of at least 50% for me personally. So, yeah.
Yeah, to like jam off what you just said, I think that's the most common thing that I've found when I talk to any artist at any skill level, no matter who they are, is there is it's almost like a spiritual practice of just believing that the universe is going to support you in ways you can't imagine. And that even though I may feel batshit crazy at times, like this is the path I should be on, and that life will come in and show me abundance in a way I could have never have fathomed. And to just like, every time I think there's a dark night of the soul, or I'm in a pinch, or I look at the bank account and I'm not just rainbows and sunshine, like know that there's just something around the corner, and it's kind of this test to like, can I keep pushing? Can I go to the next level? And usually there's always something miraculous around the corner, and it's just more of a, like almost like we go through the emotional process of our ego and our judgment and trying to get this divineness out onto the canvas. It's the same thing with trying to work with abundance and receiving ship and belief in the universe. And it's kind of just been this consistent mirror of the more I can just surrender and trust life, the more it'll show up in weird ways. Like I'll meet someone in the airport and they'll be like, oh yeah, one day like we should do something. And then I got a phone call before this big journey. It's like my largest commission I've ever had for a 9-foot tall or maybe 8-foot tall oil painting. And it's just like these moments keep coming in. So I really want to focus on that of like, there is no answer. Like, to try to go back a little bit. I grew up in Texas. My parents are Republican. I didn't have a cool alternative scene. I had to find it myself. I didn't know a bunch of artists, even in Austin. Like, there were some artists doing some things like Michael Garfield, but there wasn't a high level of expression of the visionary artwork. I found there were a lot more mural artists there, so I kind of went the mural route for a while and, like, go to yoga studio. I like taking class. They have a blank wall. Like, let's team up. Give me some yoga, maybe a little cash. I'll paint a mural. And I kept doing that. And eventually, like, I would watch things on the internet or Instagram and, like Luke or Amanda Sage, and then eventually, like, went to Cosm, did a workshop. I tried to pull all the business information out of Amanda, and it's like, she's got her own magic. Then I, like, eventually decided I was going to dedicate my life, and I wrote an email to Lawrence, the guy who ran the Vienna Academy of Visionary Arts. And I was like, I want to learn these things. Can you teach me? And he was like, yeah. So then I sold all my shit. I flew to Vienna on a one-way ticket and spoke no German. And then I had a class with Luke. And I was like, Luke, tell me all of your secrets. How do you do this? And he's like, dude, there's no way you could replicate this. And then I talked to every other teacher. I was there for a year. And I talked to every teacher. I mean, I was so inspired by you and what you've done in your work and, like, your magic stories of how to sell a painting. But, like, for me to align my synchronicities to your path and try to copy those, it's just not feasible. Like, you are Luke Brown, I am Gage Kelsey. We have different ways of interacting in the world, showing up. And I did that for there's a teacher I had, his name was Oleg, and this dude's like this hardcore Russian dude. He's maybe like 60 or 70, super sexist. He was in Russia when the mob took over Russia and it fell. And, like, he literally supported his life by painting portraits in pubs of Russian mafia wives. And he did that for like 10 years to just, like, get through the fall of Russia. So, like, there's just all these different things, and no artist has the same path. So I think the real truth to it is like believing that what you're doing is what you're supposed to do in life, and that life will support you. And that can look 1,000 different ways. And, like, none of our stories will be the same except for we didn't quit. That's the only thing. And if someone needs a side job, if someone has wealthy parents, if someone whatever, it doesn't matter. It's just, like, don't quit and keep having faith. So, yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's spot on. That's very congruent with my experience. And there's such a distinct correlation with that I see playing out in my life constantly. And how many times is it going to be replicated before it's, like, really deeply instilled that this has everything to do with just really just having faith and trusting that the pieces come into play if you're just in the just in total vibrational congruency with your ultimate authenticity and your dharma duty and your mission, and that the pieces will fall into place. And this path of being on as an artist has been the ultimate template for that to present itself, because I'm really at the mercy of the hologram. There's no guarantee behind what I'm doing or where it's going to come from or when or how or from whom, and yet it does. And so many moments where I'm, like, right up to the month, the rent's due the next day. I don't know where it comes from. I don't have all the arrangements set up for, a comforting guarantee behind what I do. And if I'm in a condition internally of feeling and embodying and emanating the worst case scenario, then I'm interfering with the flow of creation. And I've been in these positions endless times where I'm just like, no, it's all good. I'm in my commitment to this dharma duty. Everything works out. And then an email or a phone call shows up that's like, hey, we're a band from the UK. We love your work. Could we license this piece you did 4 years ago for our album cover? What's your bank account details? And I'm like, well, that just happens to be the amount that my next 2 months are worth. Can you send it directly to my landlord? Here's the account details. Like, what brought that character in at that time? And how many times is that going to happen from, like, oh, it has to do with me just, like, being in a place of faith and comfort that I'm here to be supported and thrive. Like, how many variations of that are going to happen where I'm like, oh, I'm in a holographic imaginatrix that's reflecting my imagination of myself, and I don't need to follow threads of thought that says that, like, I'm not worthy, this isn't going to work out, what if this, what if that, what if, what's the best that can happen? It's like, yeah, I've been really grateful that I've been on this trajectory as an artist that has thrust me into the deep end with this experiment of how to just be in alignment, and that this is the right course of action. I mean, like, yeah, just the whole time during COVID where the whole world shuts down and uncertainty is the name of the game across the planet, and everybody's in their, the full upheaval of all their unprocessed shadow material. And I end up in this place where I'm just like randomly encountering people who are just wholeheartedly supporting me, and not only abundantly, but they're actually like really phenomenal characters that are like deeply a part of my life now. I'm like running into someone on the beach that's like, hey, I heard you were an artist. How cool. I've got $50,000. What could you make for me? And I'm, like, I've got no other things lined up to support abundance. I'm like, wow, like, how did I meet this person on the beach? Like, just these situations like that, that's something that I really want to emphasize, that this is a possibility in the matrix. And I see that possibility is very much related to my imagination of myself. And so I need to really have my attention of what is the deepest essence of my imagination of myself. Am I here to worry about the worst case scenario, or am I here to just stay on course with, this is the gift from God that I just have to be committed to, and everything is fine as long as that's where I am. And then here are these situations to validate that over and over and over and over and over. And that's what I want to bring to this experience, is like, that's my present felt experience. How do you corroborate that? How do you validate that? How is that? But that's been my experience, and I see the relationship, and so that just instills a deeper confidence that this is the possibility. I also grew up with examples around me of living artists, people that were abundantly supported for their art. So it wasn't a big stretch of my imagination that I had to research and dream of. I mean, there were people that lived down the street from me. There were friends of my parents. Like, I saw it. It was something that I was like, oh yeah, that's a possibility, just as being a lawyer is a possibility, just as, being a carpenter is a possibility. It wasn't outside of my frame of reference. So that's really, something that I carried with me as well. So.
Yeah, Luke, I resonate a lot with that sharing, because, for me in my path as an artist, there have been so many times where it's been like, oh God, like, just kind of gripping on with, like, I don't know, $0 in the bank account or whatever. And then it's like out of nowhere, some sort of thing just like manifests. And I think that those moments have just really, given me a sense of trust and confidence that no matter what happens, I've been through these circumstances a million times. I've always found a way through, and I can use my creativity to make it work out, and to trust that. And there have been so many times also where there have been unexpected and synchronistic meetings with people that became supporters in ways that I completely didn't expect. And it kind of seems like the more I'm focused on trying to manifest those circumstances, like the farther away from me they are. It's like this saying, a thief only sees pockets or something like that. It's like it blocks your channel, but the more I'm just kind of in my own flow and enjoying life and celebrating life and being present with what is, those random encounters and synchronistic encounters seem to happen more commonly. And there's been so many times where I've gone to a festival just for fun, where I'm like, I'm definitely not going to sell anything at this little festival. I just want to get high with my friends and like have a good time. And I'm on the dance floor and somebody randomly comes up to me and they're like, did you paint that? And I was like, yeah, that's my art. They're like, I want to buy it. And I was like, wait, what? Really? Like, no way. So yeah, all these kinds of, it's like being open to randomness and synchronicity, I think, is important. Also, though, there's something really essential. One of the first things I kind of learned from an art workshop that I went to, there's this guy, Jason Manley. He used to run this company called Massive Black, but he was talking about how one of the artists that I worked with, Kevin Llewellyn, who's like a really successful artist in LA, used to just like bring his sketchbook everywhere and just constantly be drawing. And like he would therefore always be sort of promoting his art, because anywhere he went, like people would see like, wow, this guy's an amazing artist. So it's like shameless self-promotion. You have to be willing to put your art out there. And back to this thing around synchronicity and chance, there have been plenty of occasions where I have gone to a store and been like, hey, do you want to put some of my art up? And they're like, yeah, sure. And it's on consignment, and the art's been in there for like a year, 2 years, no one's bought it, and I don't think anything's going to come of it. But then just one day somebody randomly goes into that store, sees my art, and that opens some kind of door for some big opportunity that I wouldn't have had otherwise if my art wasn't out there. So you really need to put your art and be active and sort of, forward moving and initiate opportunities for yourself in putting your art in places where people will be able to see it and encounter it. Like if I didn't go to the festival and if I didn't have my art out, that guy on the dance floor never would have seen it and approached me to buy it. So you need to actually put your stuff in places where people are going to see it. And the more you do that, the more of a chance there is for people to encounter it who either want to buy the artwork itself or might have another opportunity for you, like an event that they run or a band that they're in that they want you to do something for or whatever. And also, yeah, like it's been pretty unstable, at a lot of times for me as an artist. There have been times where I've made a lot of money as an artist, and there have been times where it's been really, really sparse. And I personally am not that averse to that. I've never really been somebody that has like a very strong need for security, and that's been fine for me, but it has at times been a little stressful, but I think it's worth it. I would rather have that instability of not having a consistent or secure income or reliable, like guaranteed source of income, but yet to do something that I really love, that feels rewarding. But it has been at times, a bit of a roller coaster. And I think one of the things, like I didn't really start saving money till like a year or two ago. And I really think it's important to just have certain systems set up where you put certain percentages of your money away into like different accounts, and to have one that's for like living expenses, one that's actually for your business and things like that. And I kind of wish I started doing that earlier, because in the past I've been in those periods of time where I've been making a lot of money and just been like, woo, this is great, this is going to last forever. And it's like, no, it won't. I guarantee there will be times where you're going to earn a lot of money as an artist, times where you're not going to earn much money at all. And you have to kind of set yourself up to have, resources to weather those storms when things get tough. And I think that's just something I wish I learned earlier. So I guess in that vein, if there's any like specific pieces of advice that any of you would have for kind of like younger versions of yourself, like things that you've learned over time that have helped you operate as a professional artist, curious to hear that.
I opened up my LLC, I think, like 2 years ago now, and I wish I had done it sooner. LLC. So, it's, yes. It's my own company, so it's like I own it. I'm the sole proprietor of it, so it's mine. And so legally, like now I'm Shannon Miguela Art, LLC. And so I have a business card because of that. So I put all my expenses on there. And so something I wish I had known sooner was to do that sooner, because you can write off everything that you buy for your business specifically. So if you're making art in your home, if you're using gas to get to a live festival that like hired you, right? Do like some food here and there, like for like business meetings, whatever, art supplies, absolutely, right? Your phone, like for me, like I had Shannon Miguela Art, and now it's like, I actually recently ripped the cord from working from someone else a year ago now. Yeah, just a year, almost a year of being full time. And it's not just making art, it is, I teach as well. So everything I do that supports that business, which also included my phone line because I talk to my students on there, right? You can write off, and it helps me stay organized too because I can see like where I'm making my money as well and where I'm spending it. And then I have like in a savings account too. So just staying organized in that, because when I was young, I was the same way. I was like, woo, I just sold a big painting. Like, you know, let's do whatever with it. But then I got to points where I was like, oh my God, like I don't have any money. Like, I don't know where to go. Like from here, like, do I keep making originals? Do I sell prints? And at that point, it's like a survival mode. So it's like really sucks the inspiration out. And that can be like a real tricky space. So staying organized and knowing like when it's time to switch over. I think there's like two ways you can really, two main ways you can really like switch on over to being a full-time artist, whatever that looks like for you, is you could just rip the cord and do it, like no matter where you're at, no matter how much money you have, and just be like, fuck it, I'm gonna eat ramen noodles and eat out of my car and be a full-time artist, whatever your choice is. Or you could do it slowly and safely. There's no real safety about it. There's no security, right? But you could really like gradually move into it, which is what I did. But I wish someone had said to me sooner, like, you know, just you're in the right spot to do it. Because I had a lot of people just be like, rip the cord, or like, you know, wait, always have a side job, because everyone does it differently. And I always told myself that I would have a main source of income besides making art, which a lot of it was teaching. But at one point I was in a gallery working, I was teaching art, I was working in a yoga studio. I've had so many jobs, so many. I was working for like 2 different mural companies, like glazing porcelain tiles at one point. And working for an opera company house doing actually like hand painted scenic work, which was so cool. It's like at one point I designed a 50-foot by 100-foot curtain for Cinderella, which is like a Broadway or a ballet play rather. But you know, all those experiences I never would have changed. All those steps like I had to where I am now, they all needed to happen because I gained so much knowledge about business, about relations with people, like finding your strength and like leaning into that, I think is also important advice. I realized later on that my strength was like community, and like I'm extremely extroverted. So I actually was like, wow, I just need to meet people and talk to them. Wait a minute, like I love people, like this is great. So I just kept inserting myself into like galleries and shows and whatever, and just kept meeting people. So like most of like the money that I make is through people that I connect with, especially like one-on-one, right? And also I think one more good advice earlier on I wish I got better at was like knowing how to talk about your artwork. And I think the only way to get good about that is getting out there and you know, whatever it is, if you're like hanging up your artwork somewhere in like a coffee shop, right, being around and drinking coffee and talking to people, just being able to speak about it. Like people want to know about you, and they want to know about the story behind it as well. So the more authentic you can be, and the more you can like really create that portal between you and someone else, there's going to be more magic that happens there, I think. So some good advice I wish I had earlier on.
Yeah, I really think that being social and building relationships is extremely essential as an artist. It's something that I've seen define either people that are successful as artists or not, is usually having good social skills. And when it comes to getting into galleries, for example, having a good relationship with a curator, curators are going to invite people that they like and know and are fun to work with to be a part of their projects. It's always a collaboration, you know, so I think that's something really essential, is just going out and talking to people and forming good relationships, especially with people that are kind of in the scene and community around art. And another thing that I wish I did earlier is to, first of all, you want to have a high resolution photograph of all of your artworks. That's really essential, because then if you sell the original, and I've had, for example, like I sold an original to a guy whose house burned down. So that painting is now gone forever. And those kinds of things will happen where you'll lose pieces, like you'll never see them again. But I still have the high-res photo of it. So, you get the high-res photos, 300 DPI, that's the print resolution. And then, you have them back up your hard drives, uploaded to like the cloud, whatever you need to do. Those are like your priceless, those things are priceless. You need to really make sure those files stay safe and that they don't get, also like you got to keep the security on them, make sure they don't get like taken by other people that can print. I had some company in China was like printing 1 million sweatshirts of my art, and I saw them at like every festival I went to, and I was like, dang, there's nothing I can do about that. Like you can hire a lawyer, but it becomes extremely expensive and extremely difficult. So it's just, there's nothing you can do. So somehow they got the file and they were making bootlegs of my art. It's going to happen. I've had stuff bootlegged. We were talking to, like Luke and I were talking about, he's had stuff bootlegged. Like it happens. It's not like the biggest deal in the world, but it can happen. But also keeping track of like actually writing out documents when you sell a work of art, and keeping official documents like contracts that show exactly how much you sold it for, who has it, where it is. Because if you can do that, and if you have a paper trail, which I have never done, but if you do this, and I wish I did, and you have this legal paper trail of originals that you've sold, you can then take your artworks to an appraiser, and you can get your artworks legally appraised because you have legal evidence that you've sold them for certain amounts of money, and then those become legal assets that you own. You can even go into a bank and you can use your artworks as assets that you can leverage to take loans. And there's so many things you can do if you actually have this like legal trail. And so that's one advantage to keeping really good organized documentation on the sale of your artworks. But another thing is just, I have no idea where my artworks are. Like I've sold my art. There's art that I made that I sold that I don't even remember, like probably, and I have so many paintings just scattered all over the place. And I don't really have a very clear, I've never really kept records of like who owns those paintings or where they are. And if I ever wanted to do a retrospective, of my artwork, or even what if I died and somebody wanted to do a retrospective of my art, how would they find the art? It'd be hard enough for me, the person who made it and sold it, to find it. But if you have all that stuff recorded, then it can become a lot easier to track down your artworks if you ever wanted to borrow them back or even buy them back, which is something sometimes artists do if they have their own museum collection, rather than just not really keeping track of it and not having a clear idea of where the art is. So that's something that I personally wish I had done, and I would advise everybody to keep detailed contracts and records. Another thing that is something I learned the hard way is that when you're taking commissions, you want to always take a deposit up front, like a 50% deposit ideally before, and then you don't deliver the artwork until it's been paid for in full. I had people that I trusted, rib me off for artwork or just not pay me for commissions that I put a lot of time and energy into. So having that is security for you. If somebody pays you a deposit and then they flake out, you keep the deposit. That's non-refundable. It's happened many times. I've also had plenty of people be like, oh my God, I really want to buy that painting, talk my ear off about it for a long time and never actually commit to it. So asking for a deposit is proof. It's like, show me the evidence that you actually really want this painting. And yeah, that can really go a long way and be really helpful, and motivate those people also. If they have a non-refundable deposit that they've given you, they're going to be more motivated to actually follow through and buy the painting. So I would really recommend taking a deposit. And yeah, those are just some little tips that I learned the hard way.
Mm-hmm. Some gems in that. I think I want to say just a couple of things. Yeah, you guys have definitely shared the points that I would probably touch on first. But I feel like I want to speak to all the introverts out there, because I know that there is like a lot of people that, when we're in our deep dive creative process, the whole wide world and getting our art out there and being up there with the galleries and all of just out in the world can sometimes feel like a very different kind of reality. So like myself included, I feel like there's also just other ways that you can be creative. Like you don't always necessarily have to be right in the eye of it all. Well, you kind of do, but there's just other ways, I suppose. But one thing that I just feel like just speaking into, just to kind of like mix things up a bit, is just like structuring your day. Like what does your day look like? When are you in a space where you want to deep dive? Is that like nighttime for you? Is that first thing in the morning? Whatever. And then when is it that like suits you to just like sit down and get on social media and make some posts or follow up with those people that were interested in your pieces or whatever. Like just acknowledge and be at peace at the fact that there are different brain spaces for your job. You're juggling many different hats, and sometimes they don't mix in the exact moment. Like when I'm having a solid painting deep dive, I just don't reply to messages. I'll do it the next day. But it's just like if people are kind of, it's just staying in that container. But be consistent, like just know that it's a part of the job. There's just many hats, and find fun ways of like enjoying those hats. And, know that it's kind of a lot, when you're doing it's kind of like running two jobs, really. But if you love it and you also love seeing people get lit up by what you share, it kind of gives you all of that extra bandwidth, If you know that you're doing what you're here to do on the planet, you somehow just get like a whole lot of extra energy. But you just it's just juggling your day. And it might not even be in a day. It might be in a week. Maybe there's a deep dive for like a few days. And then you come out and you pop out the other side and you're like, hey, I'm here. So it's just like finding what works for you, I think. So I think that's just one thing I feel like sharing. The other thing is just don't give up. Just keep doing it. Everyone's like, what's the key? What's the key? And it's like, just keep doing it. Even especially when you're like, oh my God, this painting is shit or whatever. It's like, hang on. Like, there's a level up that's just around the corner most likely because you're pushing your boundary and all of your feelings are going to come up. And, it's like those healing level ups that happen, like when you shine light in the corners, you get the opportunity to see more. And I feel like that can relate to other areas as well. And for art, when we're ready to just like take the next step, there can often be those little crunchy moments, but just know around the corner, that this is why you do it. And the final thing is just seeing, like, I'm sure there's lots of artists that you feel inspired by and you're like, wow, they're so great what they do. It's like with any successful person, you may not see the actual journey that it took to get there. But the thing, just with success in general, it's just like the thing that everyone has in common is that they didn't give up, and that I think there's a passion that's just innate in us that means that we don't want to give up. Even if we feel like we want to, we're like, oh my God, I actually can't do that. Like, that would be the worst thing ever. So it's just like, just keep doing it. And the final thing very quick is if you're super stoked about what you're doing, you'll just do more of it, so you'll get better at it. And also, if you're super stoked about what you're doing, then when you meet your friend or whatever and they're like, how was your day? You're like, well, I just painted this awesome thing and I'm excited about it. And they're like, cool, I want to see it. And then, of course, there you go. You're just showing the world what you're doing and it's just in a flow. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Everything everyone said is really good, from like being organized. Like, I can even do better when I go back. Like, I need to get a separate credit card for just my art stuff, and it's set up to QuickBooks. So every time I swipe the credit card, all the expenses go on one credit card and they go into this tax filing system, and every country has their own version. But just like, get your expenses in line. When you look at it and you're like, wow, I spent this much money on supplies. Like, how much did I spend on art? Or like, oh, I spent X thousands of dollars on prints. What did I make off prints? Like, my ad dollars. Like, you can get really logical with it there. And I think that's a great thing to do structurally. And like Jake said, it like right now it's cool to be a hippie and run around. But eventually, if you want to own a house or do all these things, having a track record of paying taxes and all that shit is a good thing to have. Even if you zero out your taxes where you have more expenses or just enough to cover the amount you made, that's a wise thing to do. And then also, like, I think a big thing for me is that we have this tendency to divide like, okay, I'm either in the art hat or I'm the business hat, and business is serious and it's hard and it's not fun. And I think if we can shift that perspective to being like, how creative can we be with business, a lot more opportunities come. And it's like, for instance, last year someone hit me up on Instagram, was like, hey, you should show some work at this bagel shop. And I was like, why would I show my artwork at bagel shop? Like, it was close to my house. They make good bagels, but it's like, I don't know, got like taxi patterns on it. It's really fucking weird, but they make good bagels. So I had a bunch of G clays laying around. I wasn't doing any shows soon, so I went and like hung some G clays there, and then I forgot about it. And life goes on, and then I look at the end of the year of like how much money I'd made from that bagel shop. It was like 15 grand had come from bagel shop. Like, I don't know, it's crazy. From G clay sales, from leading to another mural, and I was like, who knew the bagel shop was going to be like really high up in my money game last year, you know, for an individual thing. So I think there's this, like, the universe plays cosmic jokes on you and likes to make you giggle, but also just like, don't be closed off. And like, over the years, I've started opening myself up to a few more commissions that I normally wouldn't do, and those have led to my name getting out in circles they wouldn't have normally reached, and I found more cool opportunities happening there. So I think there's this tendency to be like, okay, I've made it to a certain point in my career, I'm never going to take commissions. And then I started opening myself up to a few more commissions, and that kind of turned on the faucet for money a little bit more to arrive. And just seeing the commissions as a meditation to just get better at my skill set. And I think in the end, we can chop it up every way. Like, staying at home and hibernating your whole life, like, that's not going to work. You got to get out there and talk to people. But also, like, it is really important to just like get good at your art. Behind each one of us is like a lot of heroes' journeys of solo nights on the canvas or solo mornings, and like crying, being upset, brushing your teeth, waking up every morning, the canvas is like yelling at you. It's like, I know we're going to get there. Like, don't worry about it. So it's all that. It's like, go to all the gallery shows that are in your area. Like, support the artists. Like, print 10 million stickers. Everyone you talk to about your art, give a fucking sticker to. They're going to put it on a water bottle. Then your name's going to be on it. And there's just all these little things of like, people don't, okay, like, a lot of the artists here have really rad art, but in the end, like, the art that people have bought from me, I think 50% is because I've been the person that's made it. Like, the art is cool, but they like the words I have. They like my journey. It's like they're buying a frequency of me. When they put it on the wall, it's an energetic device, and it's tied to my resonance and my passion and my, like, say fuck it, like, pull the ripcord and just, like, go for it. Like, commit to what you want to do in life. And so by having these conversations, like all of them said, about your art and about all that, like, people may not buy your art immediately, but like, they may get bougie ass jobs in 5 years and then come back and be like, yo, I can drop 10K on a painting. Like, let's go. You inspired me this many years back down the path. So just be open, put yourself out there, print a bunch of stickers, shamelessly talk about your art, just like almost be annoying about it. And things will happen from there.
Right on. That so much being expressed here is so congruent with my experience, but in retrospect, just wishing that I had been more on top of proper documentation of my early years, and feeling like I was so prolific and just constantly just pumping stuff out, feeling like it's cool, my creativity is never going to run out. Like, I had to just make that sale, but I got a photograph of it, but then it's like actually kind of turned out blurry, but whatever. More paintings are coming, but and realizing that just there's whole eras that are just not properly documented, and some got burned up in a house fire, losing all my sketchbooks, losing hard drives, etc. And also just being in this level of commitment where just being in this condition where whatever you're working on, the future of your life is not hinging on the absolute success of this thing, and treating what you're doing as a commitment to a discipline, just as a commitment to, if you want to get fit and healthy, going to the gym, you're not going to walk out and be absolutely shredded. It's going to take time, and anything you're doing is going to be a contribution and an increment to improving. And if that's your intention, then it's like, just being in that condition where you're just in relationship with that creative conduit, no matter what the outcome is, and not getting stuck on like, okay, I'm devoting my time and energy to this, and it has to be the ultimate thing, and it has to be the next level of what came before it. And if it's not, I'm going to be ready to give up because I'm frustrated on this thing. It's like, you really have to just drop all of that entirely and just be committed to the process and enjoy what you're doing. And no matter what, anything you're going to do is going to be an increment and a progression to your upgrade. And so if you're just in that state, then, I mean, I'm always surprised at just being in that state of mind. That's where like the best things somehow emerge out of it, that I'm like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting that to come through. And like, it's like, I see the correlation there of just, if I'm just letting go of the outcome is where the best stuff happens. If I'm like too rigidly attached to, I'm like I'm standing in my own way creatively by being too attached to the outcome, and by just feeling like it doesn't matter what the outcome is, just as long as I'm enjoying whatever this is really where the biggest surprise happens, and the biggest, like the highest level of genius just emerges. And so that's something that I just have to keep reiterating for myself too. And
Yeah, I resonate so much with so many different things said that I just want to reiterate a little bit in terms of what Luke was just saying. It's really true that from quantity comes quality as an artist. And something I keep in mind is that people maybe do have a gift or something. There are sort of prodigies and geniuses in the world, but for the most part, any artist that you look up to, the only difference between that person and you is just they've put a lot more time into making art. They've just been doing it for longer. That's it. There's a really good book called Art and Fear. It's kind of like one of the Bibles on creativity, but there's a story in the book where they separate a ceramics class that's graded in two different ways. So one half of the class is graded for quality. They only have to make one pot, and the other half of the class is graded through quantity. So they get a higher grade the more pots they make. And the interesting thing is actually the half of the class that was graded for quantity made significantly higher quality pots than the one graded for quality, because the one that was graded for quality was just constantly censoring themselves, always never actually following through and completing anything. And they just were trying to make that one perfect pot, whereas the other half of the class made like 50 pots. And so they had reps and reps and reps and reps where they're just practicing and practicing and practicing. So yeah, it's like, keep in mind, you're going to make hundreds of paintings. So this painting that you're making right now is like one of minimum 100 paintings you're going to make. And you're going to look back at this painting that you're making now, and it's going to probably not be nearly as good as the work you're going to create 100 paintings down the road. So I think that that's something really important to keep in mind, and not put so much pressure on each painting, but rather see it as like part of a body of work. And that's really what it is. When you go to like the MoMA and you see the retrospective of an artist, it's like the body of work, that whole artist's life. That's the important thing. So that's really important. And then what Gage was saying, like, it goes a long way to just be a rad, authentic person. And the more you can just be authentic and show up in that way in the world, the more people are going to be naturally attracted to you and want to support you. And like I said, my first big sale of my art came through just hanging out with these people and connecting on an authentic level with them, with absolutely no agenda to sell my art to them. But they were moved by that interaction and then wanted to support me. And a lot of my sales have kind of come through that. And then also what he was saying with the bagel shop, like, you might have a big money maker in terms of like, I don't know, like I made a lot of money at Envision Festival this year, and knowing where people go that have the means to afford expensive art, it's kind of important to keep in mind. Like Envision Festival, it takes a lot of money to get there already. The kinds of people that go are people that can afford expensive works of art, so you're more likely to sell, expensive originals and things, and people do walk away spending 20 grand on a painting in the gallery there. So there are places that you can kind of, think about, okay, like maybe this Bitcoin conference in Miami is a good place to exhibit my artwork. People are going to have a lot of extraneous cash that they can let go of for expensive works of art there. And money is really relative. Like there are people that for whom $30,000 on a dinner is normal. And then there's people that $30 is a lot of money. So being able to accommodate that through different pricing tiers in what you sell, like having a sticker that's only $2, but then, your highest price item could be a $200,000 original painting. And so you can accommodate for these different levels and understand that it's very relative what people can and can't afford based on their particular life circumstances. And then what Izzy was saying, I think it's extremely important to have boundaries around social media, to have boundaries around communication in general. Deep work is essential. Deep work is like the cornerstone of any artist or thinker or creator's work. And we're the most distracted we've ever been of all times right now. There's so many distractions, and you have to be vigilant against those distractions, which means you might need to go for weeks without checking your phone. You don't need to respond to every single text message. You should turn off all notifications on your device, because you know how distracting it is if you're painting and every 15 minutes there's a notification that takes you away from painting. There's no way you're going to be able to get into a creative flow state. So I would definitely set boundaries around your creative time and at least turning off notifications, at best having your phone in another room while you're working. And that can maybe even last for longer than that single session. Like Izzy was saying, you might need to take periods of time, whether those are days, weeks, even months, where you're kind of inaccessible, to foster those concentrated, intensive periods of deep focus that can actually allow for the gestation period of the artwork to come to its full fruition, because these things take time. You have to kind of like linger in the depths sometimes, and it can be very distracting to be constantly pulled outward from obligations towards other people. So I think having those boundaries around how accessible you are is really important to kind of like, foster these deep creative flow states. And I think maybe we can also open it up for questions, does anybody have like something super urgent to say?
Payment plans are awesome. They've helped me sell so many originals. Everyone has their own rules. I like at least get a deposit up front. Most people are good humans. Sadly, I found the only people that usually haven't paid me are people I know and I thought were friends. It's always the strangers that pay me all the way through. But like literally, I probably have like 5 ongoing payment plans where it's like a little bit each month. They put a certain amount down, and then each month I have this like passive income coming in, and it's like kind of takes off the pressure. You don't get this huge explosion moment, but it's nice to set those up. And like in the end, it's like people want to buy your art, but if they can't go have a date night with their girlfriend because they bought your art, they're not going to buy your art. So it's like finding ways to help them get the art, and then also a big point of what Jake said is like, put yourself in places where there are people with money. Like, don't be scared to leave your house and spend money. Like, even if you don't have a sweet show in Art Basel, which nobody has immediately, just go there. Like, just go to these places, go to the expensive hotel. Like, I'm a big fan of Joe Dispenza. He's really helpful with mindset stuff and just creating your own reality. And like, there are a lot of people there with money. And through that, I met people that have bought my art for high prices. It just because it's normalized. And I think if we get in small circles, or we're like, oh, I can only live in this place and only spend this money and I can't go out, then you're only going to have that circle of influence. And anything is possible, but don't be scared to just like take a leap, So yeah, thank you. Oh, one last thing. Scams. Making money is great, but also losing money sucks. there's 10 million different types of email scams. If anyone says something about their wife has an anniversary, but like
I've got like 15 of those now.
yeah, but they're like, they want to keep it a secret, but they can't use the credit card because she manages the credit card. Anyone that wants to send you a check for more money than what your art is worth. And like, these people are freaking sneaky. I had a big installation. The thing would have cost $15K or $16K, and they sent me a $20,000 check. The check was legitimate. They stole someone's identity from a business account. If I didn't go to my bank and tell them to notify the fraud account to check this, the check would have gone through. There would have been cash in my account. The shipping agent would have picked up the installation with the box truck, and then I would have given them the extra cash. And then 8 months later, the money, they would have like figured out what would have happened, and then they would have taken the $20,000 out of my account. I had already paid the shipping agent $4K plus giving away my art, and I would have been host. And like, this happens all the time. Crypto is awesome, but don't be done with it. I've lost so much money in crypto, but I've also made a lot. Look into it for savings, Bitcoin all the way. I'm going to leave that short and sweet. Yeah.
At what point do you give them the art? It's
Never before.
I fully agree, but I also don't abide to that rule always. I should, but I haven't always. Anyways, listen to everyone else here.
Give them a reason to keep paying you too, because I've definitely fought people to give that last payment. I held on to a painting for like 2 years, and she only had one more payment left, and it was like, I wanted to give it over, but I didn't know if I'd see it again. Eventually I did get it, but yeah, I think paying it in full, like I would pay.
And you can have different policies around it. Like if somebody pays you a deposit and then 10 years go by and they never pay for the painting, like you can sell it to somebody who wants. I've had that happen,
Write a contract. It's like, if you don't make payments in X time, the painting is now released. You have a credit for buying another painting for the amount of money you put down,
Yeah. And that
fried paintings that never system up.
I have, yeah, it's true. I've had people like pay in full for paintings, and then I'm like, hey, you want that painting? And then just like never, I'm like, you sure you don't want that painting? Like, all right, I'll just hang out with it. So yeah, that happens sometimes too. I mean, I'll obviously give it to them like when they want it, but it's just weird to me that somebody would pay for something and just not ever get it. And I've like offered to ship it to them or whatever. So that does happen. And yeah, that scam that Gage mentioned, that is, I've almost been prey to that particular scam, and I'm glad I wasn't, but that's, some people have tried to do that with me too. And then another common scam, if you are involved in NFTs in crypto, is like they will say, oh, we want to buy these NFTs from you, and then they'll have some, oh, we need you to, there's two ways to do it. One is like, oh, we need you to send us the funds, and then we'll like do, it's like, no, you never need to send, you can just be like, here's the link to buy it, give me the coins and you'll have it. Like that's all it should ever be. Or there's sometimes things where they send an attachment. They're like, oh, the description of what I want is in this zip file. Don't open the zip file. There are like programs that will actually hack your coins, and people have lost huge amounts of money through these nefarious scams that people send out, preying on artists who are selling NFTs. So be careful for those kinds of things.
Yeah, don't sign up for other platforms that have this fee. They're like, oh, I only go on this platform, but the fee is like $1,000 to sign up. If you're in the NFT space, which it's not happening right now, and that's a whole nother world of a conversation, you send the link to your OpenSea thing, they can buy it on that marketplace, or they don't buy it. You just be safe with your crypto money, because crypto money can disappear as fast as it poofs into magic more money.
Okay, so yeah, any questions? And in asking the questions, it would be great if you could speak your question into the phone mic.
Thank you for all speaking. This has been great. I have a question about pricing originals. How do you each go about that? Specifically originals, like prints and things, I get it. Like I do that already at festivals and kind of just balancing against what other people are also selling. That's how I started like pricing my stuff. Like, oh, okay, what are you selling yours for? Okay, I'll sell mine. But for originals, it feels different. So I'm just intrigued about each of you, how that's changed over time.
Yeah, starting out, I knew I wasn't going to expect just enormous amounts for my work. You know, you can inch your way up towards higher value. I mean, if I'm going to work on a painting and I can bust them out day by day, and just, you know, then that's going to be a different price point than something I'm going to work on for 6 months. I think those paintings, based on the value of them, would probably be minimum wage in a way for, you know, but I found that as time went on, my value was kind of based on my emotional attachment to the piece, because it was like, I'm so proud of this. I want this piece as like a showcase in my life. But if somebody wants to buy it, I'll sell it for this much. And if they want it, great. If not, great. I have the painting. And then people started to pay that for that. So I'm like, okay, so now there's a precedent is starting to get established for what my work is considered. And also, like, if people come to me and they're like, I want to commission you to do this work, I find it easier to get a sense of what kind of budget they want to allot for it that is going to determine what I'm going to put into it. And more often than not, I'll go above and beyond that, because I have a hard time just putting a cap on it and being like, okay, here's good enough. I don't really work that way. I'll usually work on something until it's like I'm super stoked about it. So, and it's fun for me too, you know, to really and I'm contributing to my portfolio with, you know, really exceptional work, because I'm willing to go the distance with that. But, you know, if somebody's like, well, only have $5,000, I'll be like, okay, well, I've got a general sense of what amount of time it's going to take to hit that. But then I tend to go over that. But yeah, it's better to approach it that way with people rather than give them a shock at the end. It's like, well, this took me 6 months instead of 3, so can you give me twice the amount, because that's actually what it's worth. That's unfair. You know, better to just get a sense of what they're working with first, not to scare them away.
I mean, when it comes down to it, the price of art is made up. If you go to Art Basel, you will see absurd prices on artworks that don't make any sense. And then you'll also see incredible works of art priced super low. And it's like, I don't understand how this artist is selling this for so little. So a lot of it is very personal, you know, and you can basically name any price for your artwork. Visionary art tends to be way more expensive than a lot of other genres of art, I've noticed. Like if you go to Art Basel, if you go to like the Juxtapose art exhibition, there are some incredible works of art for like $4,000 a painting, whereas visionary art tends on the expensive side, like, you know, $40,000 or $150,000 per painting for, you know, these epic masterpieces. Not to say they're not worth it, but it's just visionary art can kind of be expensive compared to other kinds of art. And for me personally, I also work under precedence, you know, like I guess I will sell my artwork for a certain amount of money, and then once I've sold a number of pieces at that price range, then it's validated. It's like, okay, that's obviously legitimate, that's what it's worth, because now a bunch of people have paid for it at that price range. And then after a certain point, it's like a few years can go by and I notice the quality of my artwork has raised. It's like, okay, now I feel like I can legitimately raise my prices, and not like a huge amount. It's not like a 100% markup, but like maybe a 20% price increase. And then you again work to validate that. So then once a number of people have purchased artwork at that price range, then again, that price range is validated, and so that's now the price of the artwork. And I think it's just incrementally over time raising prices like that. But in a way, the market determines what your work is worth. Like what somebody's willing to pay for your artwork is the worth of that painting, and that is also that ranges quite heavily depending on somebody's financial circumstances. I've sometimes asked when somebody's interested in buying a painting, do you want to make me an offer for it? Sometimes the offer people make is more than I would have asked for it. And I'm like, okay, and that's what that person feels it's worth. That's what they can afford. There's, also, I think if you're able to hang on to your originals, it's not a bad thing. So if you're feeling very desperate for money, just unfortunately, a lot of artists will get into those desperate places and then sell their paintings for far less than they're worth. And I've heard many, many, many stories of this. And if you can try not to do that, like there's no shame in that, but if you can try to really make sure that your work is selling for what it's worth, because also, I guess the market itself functions in such a way that as you sell your work and then it's collected by somebody, then they sell it for a higher price. Like that is also what establishes the worth of your artwork, like within the market. So if you're selling it really cheap because you're in a more desperate position, that will devalue the worth of your work. So you might want to look into other ways if you really need to make the money to try to earn that money somehow other than letting the originals go for a value that's less than what they're really worth.
Yeah, as far as a precedent setting, I have catalogs of my work, and I'll include other paintings that aren't available but have been sold in the past, and there'll be the prices and just like the crossing off of all of these paintings. So, someone sees the catalog, they'll see that, these, $30,000 to $50,000 paintings have all been purchased. So it's another level of validation that this is actually accepted in the world as that. So that's been a part of it.
Yeah, I think also real quick, I think if you raise your prices too fast, you'll find out that you'll just make no sales. Like if they're not there, you'll just be like, wow, I keep taking my paintings to these things and now I have all these originals and I'm not making money. So I think there's a level, like Luke said, of like every commission I've probably ever done, I'm like, man, I'm working harder than when I got paid for. But because that effort's been put in and then that end result arrives to that level, that's what gets the next job or the next purchase because I keep showing up all the way. And I think there's just this thing as an artist where like part of us sacrificing some social life, some stability aspects. It's just like you might always be just working your ass off to do the next thing and you may not get the dollar per hour you always want. And just to be okay with it because we get to create our lives and we're all living in Bali right now, not on normal work schedules, hanging out. So it's a balance.
Yeah, the reward of good work is more work. Like making it as an artist is not like, oh, I get to like relax in my hammock and like have, servants take care of everything. It's like you get to make more art. And like that's the reward of being a successful artist is always working your ass off making more art.
The price of my originals and commissions, I always go by like size, detail, subject matter, because that'll depend on the amount of detail as well, and then like Luke said, the emotional connection to it. Like definitely sold paintings for cheaper that I didn't have like too much of an emotional connection with. And then like my first self-portrait ever, I just didn't want to sell it. I didn't want to. So when someone asked for it, it was like a painting, and this was my first big sale. It was like a painting like, well, this big, and he asked me and I like didn't want to sell it. So I was like $8-10 grand. And he was like, all right. And I was like, oh shit, like really? And that was like a few years ago. That's when I first started selling artwork too. So that was like my first like really big, and I sold it. Yeah. I gave him like a couple of payment plans. But yeah, it was like that emotional connection to it really like validated like its worth, It was a naked painting of me. So I was like, stop. It's like, I want these. Like, this feels kind of weird. Like, this is more for me than anything, like to empower me and make me feel good. So if someone's going to put this on their wall, like, I guess they got to give me a big sum of money. But yeah, I would definitely like size. When people ask me about commissions, which I'm doing a bit of those right now, which is not my main flavor of what I'd like to be doing all the time. But these days, it needs to be in my style. Like, they need to give me freedom with it too, and it must be in my style. Which for that, it doesn't suck the fun and inspiration out of it for me. But in terms of accepting a commission, I will say minimum, it's going to be this much. And I put an amount, like I have kind of like a set amount for sizes. And it's really important that I say minimum because, like, guarantee every time you're going to be making a commission, you're like, damn it, I should have asked for more. Like, this is taking a lot of time. You're like, no, I'll only do this with it. And, like, you can't help it. You're going to put, like, you know, your all into, like, every piece, hopefully, you know, like, I feel that way where it's like, I want to show up because you never know. Like, you might make prints off of this really silly llama painting. I've actually made one, but really silly llama painting, and it's like made me a bunch of money off prints because it's a silly llama painting. It makes people laugh, and not my style at all. It's so weird. But yeah, you just never know. You put your whole effort into it, and it could be residual income later too. Yeah. And on a side note of, like, keep going, this is like a little bit of a tangent from, like, how to price your pieces. Like, dude, you never know what someone is going to resonate with. Like, I had a college reach out to me and was like, hey, like, can we use your artwork? Like, here's some money. Can we just use it to, like, put into, like, a poetry book that we're doing? This happened, like, 2 years ago. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. Like, cool. Totally. Here's my files and everything. And they used, like, all my least favorite paintings, like my old artwork. And I was like, weird. Okay. Like, I have, like, much more detailed and, like, sharpened and beautiful work these days. But you just never know what people are going to like. So, yeah, circling back to, like, recording everything as well. Like, make sure you're doing that. But you've been following.
Thank you guys so much. Like, this has been incredible, like, listening to all of your stories. My question revolves around, I guess, like, social media presence and creating, like, your own personal brand. Like, do you guys have any tips and tricks for putting your own authentic spin on your Instagram or your social media, websites, etc.?
Be as honest, authentic, and vulnerable as possible. It should feel scary to post. Like, if you're not feeling a little bit edgy about it, maybe you're not diving deep enough. I don't know. I try to treat my social media kind of like a journal, but it's also like a public journal. And so I find that by having that and sharing authentically about my journey and insights, that it resonates with people. And then you can actively sell as well, right? But then it's like finding that balance. You shouldn't be always selling, but, like, finding that sort of sweet spot. I try to maintain, like, high quality photography and stuff, and I'm going to share anything on social media. I want it to, like, look good and have an overall gallery feel to it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not really, like, an expert when it comes to social media. Honestly, I try to spend as little time on social media as possible. I only go onto social media to make a post or to check messages, and I only go onto social media when I have a specific intention to be there. I don't scroll on social media. I think it's very corrosive psychologically, mentally, and extremely distracting. It's a huge waste of time. And I try not to do that as much as possible. But it's also okay if you like scrolling every once in a while. It's not like there's worse vices, I guess, but I had to set personal boundaries around it.
Quick, I say, the amount of followers you have does not correlate to how successful you are as an artist. Straight up. Some of the most successful artists I know have, like, 1,000, 2,000 followers, and they're just out there. That's how you know. They're just out there doing the thing. So I just want to say that because, like, I would beat my head, like, over not having, like, when I first started, I had, like, less than 1,000 followers, and I just, like, would always try and beat the algorithms and be spending days, like, trying to make reels, and then, like, would get, like, little to no attention on it. So it can be quite stressful. So lean into your strengths. I mean, if you're really good at social media and it's good to get advice, like, it is good to get advice on it. Like, great, you know, but then also, like, it doesn't mean everything for your artist career.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now I'm not having, like, a super massive love for social media, but I do remember there were phases where I just wanted to like share this because I noticed that it was quite interesting. And when I switched over from making clothing and I went into making art, it was so much easier to sell it because I was coming from a completely different standpoint. Like, obviously, there's the whole algorithm these days with if this is a product that you're trying to sell, it does whatever it does. But like, if you're genuinely coming from this place of like, I'm just returning back to that space I was talking about before, about just being stoked and excited and like, I made a thing, you guys. Then there's this just really sweet energy that goes with that. And I remember I was selling a lot of originals on Facebook for a few years, just off being stoked. And that was a really clear juxtaposition that was quite different from being like, here's this epic clothing range that I just spent the last 8 months pouring blood, sweat, and tears into. And it was just a different energy, even though the product was good and everything. It was just, I think people know when you're trying to sell them something versus they just want to celebrate with you. Yeah.
I don't have the best number count, but I've found at a certain point, like, my paintings take longer. So I've kind of found the strategy of like telling my story more and just like having a time lapse set up in my house with a separate phone that I can just hit play on, record on it, and it just goes. And I mean, I've done some social media workshops with friends that have the few 100,000 followers, and it was funny because I think for 3 months I dedicated myself to doing a different reel every day of the week, and people are like, holy shit, you're killing it. And I'm like, this has just been my life for the past like 7 or 8 years. So I do think there's something to like I love, like, for instance, your social media, it's very aesthetic. It's like almost like going into a boutique here in Bali where it's like presented well. It's like cool, moody shots and different things. And I think that's beautiful. And I respect that a lot. But I think there's also something of like, I sometimes put the pressure of like, oh, I want this to be this really cool thing. It needs to be this way if I'm going to post. And like, I think at the end of the day, you just showing up and telling your story is the most important thing, because if you say nothing at all, then like no one's knows what's happens in your life. And maybe if you don't have the time to do the professional shots or you haven't figured out how you want to do it, just showing up and be like, hey, this is what's been going on in my life. Like, being an artist is a cool fucking life. And just remember that you're like the 1 or 2% of the world, and that most people are going to work doing a 9 to 5. And so your life's going to be really interesting no matter how professionally stunning it looks,
Yeah, as far as being an online promoter and presence, that's been, it's been a challenge for me to step into that place, because I am a very private person. I don't like to blatantly promote my life and what I'm up to and my personality. That's been a big hurdle to step into. And I felt that, I am very introverted, and I didn't necessarily want to attract levels of accountability to other people's energy more than I was willing to handle. And that put a hindrance on my success in a way, because it's like, there is levels of self-promotion that is required in order to bring in, upgrades and your success. I wanted my art to just speak for itself. I didn't necessarily want my face and my personality to go along with it, because I'd seen other artists and people like move into another arena of success, but then it attracting so much more energy and attention that I didn't necessarily want to have to interface with. But then also, as the years went on, I realized I am actually pretty well suited to meet that. And so it's been a balance of just pushing into that, but also like just pushing the art and letting that speak for itself, and letting the rest just find its place.
Yeah, there's really not any one way to do it, like I've been more, like my social media is more about me in a way than it is about the art. And I find that those things have a direct correlation where Like I've sold more art through Instagram than any other place by far. Like Instagram has been my main source of income throughout my career, and I feel like me sharing authentically about my story is like something that attracts more success in that. But then also there's some artists, you know, like Android Jones literally doesn't use social media. Like he has an assistant that does that, and you know, you don't have to also use, you don't have to be on social media. You can just, you know, not even have the app on your phone, install it just when you want to post a painting, just be like, I made a thing, that's the caption, bye, and that's fine. You know, so like there's if you're more introverted, you don't really want to share that much about yourself, and you just want your art to speak for itself, that's completely valid also, and everybody just has like different styles with it. What do you say?
Yeah, I kind of just had another quick question about, sort of where you sell your art. Do you each have a website? And when it comes to selling prints, do you have a stockpile? Obviously, you're going to have a stockpile if you've done festivals, but the majority of the time, do you arrange like printing through dropship, so it's like just all of that admin is like taken out of your hands and it just kind of goes direct to client? Just how do you work that sale point? Or is it, I'm guessing it's a mix of both, like have some stock yourself and then do drop shippy stuff. But yeah, how does that work for each of you?
I have a website that's so old and disorganized, and like I really need to do something about it. It's an embarrassment. But then also I do have the drops. I use a website called Printful. That's a drop shipping company. I never advertise it, and I'm always surprised, but you know, every once in a while I'll just be like, oh, I got a deposit in my account. Oh wow, somebody like bought this thing on my website, and then I didn't have to do anything. It's just pure passive income. So I would say that it's important to familiarize yourself with how to, get good quality photographs of your artwork, format the prints and files, familiarize yourself with the basics of Photoshop to be able to know how to, you know, get things printed and stuff like that. And then, I have a lot of stock at home that I haven't been very good at advertising, but, you know, would bring to events and things like that. Or also something that's been good in the past is you can go into different stores and you can it's great if they want to buy wholesale. And I've had those opportunities sometimes where you just kind of cold approach a store, bring your artwork in, do you want to look at this? And then they give you a check and they walk away with a bunch of stock, or they might have it on consignment. That's another good thing to do.
I think Shopify is like $300 a year, around there. Yeah, the first years they give you an insanely good deal. You can link it to Instagram. Oh yeah, you can integrate it. Yeah, I would recommend Shopify. Etsy's cool, but it's easy for people to get distracted on Etsy because they'll see other people's artwork. It'll be like recommended. Whereas Shopify, it's just your artwork. So they're like coming in there to see your artwork, and they're not going to get distracted by anything else. You gonna say something?
Well, yeah. Also, like artists that sell the most online pay for advertising. There's a way that you can sort of track stuff through the back end and like actually see what somebody spends on advertising. And like Alex Gray spends like $15,000 a month on online advertising or something like that. And so like it is worth. Unfortunately, the way that social media was designed is that they get you hooked on the free product and then they switch it into something that you have to pay for. So the algorithm barely reaches people now unless you pay for advertising. But if you know how to do those advertisements and set it up, and I'm not even necessarily very expert in it, but I have friends and that's like their, you know, autistic hyperfixation. They're like really good at that, and they've helped me set up some ads that have been extremely effective, and also Google advertisements where you can advertise on, you know, the on YouTube videos and stuff like that. That's also a good way to go. But if you want to optimize online marketing and online sales, like understanding how to do that, researching that, and actually implementing and paying for advertising is quite important, I think. Anybody?
All right. I do have a website, and it is pretty well functioning, and I'm pretty much functioning my reality in Bali through the online realms. I'm not really in a position to be doing like awesome exhibitions, which is like a downside of living here. But their upside is just that it's kind of stoked the fire to kind of make that kind of online reality work. And although I don't really advertise, I'm not really like on social media being like, hey, go on my website. I don't even know if people know I have a website. But the thing that's really useful about it is that when you get people, I just get tons of messages all the time like, oh, where can I get this? Or where do I find this? And rather than like having to sit there and be like, blah, 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 right? This whole message, you'd be like, here's the link. I'm just like, okay, a few people have messaged me about this same thing. I'm going to make a page on my website that just means I can just link them straight there and then they can buy it. So, but I do have quite a few different products and they do have like a few different realms. So like the drop shipping thing is really great. And I actually like align with a different country depending on where the customer's coming from for like, for instance, their canvases. So like, there's probably like 3 companies I use, but like if it's in Australia, I wouldn't get like an American company because the postage is really expensive and that kind of stuff. And then I've got tapestries, which I've set something up where the maker people send them directly. And then my bikinis, I've got someone in Australia that has the stock and she'll send them directly. And it's a bit of a like, I've got like 4 different places where things kind of come from, but at the same time, I don't know, it just financially kind of feels like it works better that way because there are some of these like overarching printing companies, but maybe like the tapestries are just like ridiculously expensive or you get a really tiny percentage. So I've kind of like honed it so certain things just work in different ways and I'll make quite a bit more on the tapestries, for instance, than, I don't know, some other aspect, but it kind of balances out. Yeah, so yeah.
I think something to really pay attention when you do the drop shipping stuff is just quality. Like if you're sitting out shit quality prints, then it speaks to your work and then all the friends that go over to that house of that person, and there's definitely an effect. And like, you know, also when you look at prints, like you can have your cheap festival prints for $20 or $30 that are certain quality, but then it's nice to have some like really good paper prints that are a little bit larger, and like American size or inches would be like 18 by 24 or 20 by 24 that people can frame, and like maybe they're not really ready for an original or they're a little short on cash for a G-Clay or just a present for someone else. Like, it's nice to have those different things and to like for me, I have the same guy that photographs my work do all of my prints, and like I don't have this huge shipping situation. So like until I have a really big demand on my website, it's not really that big of a deal to have a 2-week turnaround, and I just package up prints and I go to the post office like once every 2 weeks. But like to speak in person, I sell a lot of my stuff in person at events. I bring around $3 prints all the way to a few $100 G-Clays and $1,000 originals. And I make tons of my money just through selling reproductions of my work. And there's something about being able to color match and see the quality that's just so nice. And like, if there's a mess up, my guy redoes it and I trust him. And then this is a little off, but I think it's important to say, one of my big things for when I was really starting out full time was, in different cities, wherever you live around the country, there's different neighborhoods that really support artists. And so in Denver, there's something called the Santa Fe Art District. And Threda is a really magical gallery. If you don't know about it, check them out. They do really awesome clothing too, which I've worked with them, both helping them stretch canvas during COVID, but also they've sold tons of my designs and they get it all printed. They spend thousands and thousands of dollars on marketing and I just get a royalty check. I know Luke's in it too, and it's just like they do quality work. They spend maybe 15, 20 grand a month on ads, and then I just get a paycheck, which is super rad. But I got a studio. It didn't have great windows, but I was on that block, and there's 50, 60 studios on this block, and once a month there are maybe 500, 600 people that go through my studio at that time. And once a year they close down the street, and there's 70 to 120,000 people going through that street. And Shannon's done a lot. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, and so basically like me and my ex-partner had a studio. It was pretty much like a isolation tank box with one window looking at some sky. And it cost me about $550 to $600 total per month. and I would use it as a studio, and it wasn't the most glamorous. I'd have to drive to get there, which was good to get out of bed and like put on a shirt and like not just paint in underwear or whatever. But like the reality is like every first Friday I would show up and like it was down a hall, so we put a sign up the front. It was like donation beer. We got people up the top that would never come to our work, and they wanted $1 beer, and it was like great. We got cases of beer. And then we'd have print racks, and we have some funky tunes, and it was like one wall was like a gallery wall with all the G-Clays, and then we'd have one wall that would just be like our major paintings. And like on average, one of us splitting the studio would make on a low end maybe $500 a night, but on a high end without original selling maybe $1,300 for a night. And so if there's two of us doing that, like within the evening, we've covered the studio costs, we've started paying rent for our own house, and we have all these people that aren't festival people. We have, like, I got a mural commission painting an astronaut meditating, and God, the amount of 5-year-olds to 12-year-olds that love that print and their parents buy it for them like hotcakes. And so I think there is something to, like, if you can do the online presence, which mine is just not there, I would love it to be there, and like Jake's done it, some of these other people, it's fucking awesome. I'm just not there. So I've really utilized like being in a city, being in a wealthy place, and finding ways to connect to different like hubs of art and exposing myself to people. And there's like with that, like you'll get a drunk guy that tries to light up a cigarette in your studio occasionally. It's like, oh, does that cat have titties on it? And you're like, okay, dude, like fuck off politely, you know? So like, it does. It is a cat with titties on it. But like, so there's a balance with it. But I think with all this, it's just like be creative with it. And long tangent over.
I have a website, and pretty much the one thing that I'm managing myself is the sale of the limited edition canvas prints, which are a pretty, upper range price point, and also offering hand embellished prints. So for double that price, I will paint on top of the print and make it unique for that person. That's the one thing that at this point I'm just overseeing myself. Over the years I've worked with different groups, signing my art to certain products, and then having to pull the plug on them because just a lack of transparency of how much is being produced, how much is being sold. Why am I the one that's having to send you an endless amount of emails to find out what's owed? Just them proving their lack of accountability and having to just, withdraw everything. So I've narrowed it down to, there's like four companies that I'm working with that are making, silk kimonos, fans, yoga mats, clothing, mainly. And Threda is one of them, and they're just fantastic. Really,
He's a wizard on marketing.
Yeah, he's just very difficult to get clear answers from when you want them. But
The artists to say go up on this right now, how would you?
do they have international artists? Were they doing Brian Itch?
They have international artists. Oh yeah, I don't know if I can necessarily. I think with any gallery, you start showing up, and if you can't show up in physical presence, start showing up in digital presence, and just have work that's so dope that galleries just want you. Because like, I mean, the thing is, like, Peter is a close friend of mine in Threda, and I can't speak on his behalf. Each person is different. How art arrives. I mean, Shannon's worked a lot with Threda, and like, I mean, the reason I got to get in the door there was because they needed help during COVID. I had a studio across the street from their gallery, and they just needed an extra person. And I was like, dude, one day a week, this would be lovely. Like, they came up to me and asked me that, and I was like, one day a week, this helps me take the pressure off my art. I can still work 4 or 5 days a week, have a single day off, and like, I'm just breathing a little bit more. But through doing that, I was able to create a relationship of like, I'm in there, he sees me, he sees what I'm working on and the effort I'm putting in, and then things evolve from that as they naturally do. But yeah, I can't tell you. Dope RFPs, maybe, I don't know. Good emails.
Every gallery kind of has like a different aesthetic, if you will. So like, for example, Threda leans more on the heavy, like psychedelic abstract side. So if you're coming in like with something that is like nothing like that at all, like they're just not going to want it. It depends who you are. Yeah, like it's just, but what I'm saying is like galleries, like they all have like a certain want. Like one time I applied to this gallery, it was like one of my first galleries I applied to, I didn't get in. And I was like, hey, like, you know, what can I do like to get into this maybe next year? And then they sent me like their like saying or whatever, like their range of what they're looking for. So it's good to know like where you're applying to, right? You should be like, oh, my artwork, if it fits into this, you know, or it does, don't bother if it's not even like, you know, like your style as well.
Yeah, you can reach out to galleries also. I used to spend a lot of time sending emails or Instagram messages just to reach out to different places that I wanted to work with, or, you know, galleries, organizations, like whatever. And you might get a lot of lack of response, and you might get some people that just straight up say no, but it's free. It's worth just sort of making that effort to get out there. And I think I had a very rich and wise friend who told me, if you want to make money, help other people make money. And it's something to consider. Like, galleries are for-profit businesses. They want to show art that they're going to be able to sell. And so if you show art at a festival, for example, and you make that festival and the gallery curator a lot of money, they're going to want to have you back, because basically what you're doing is you're working in collaboration to help them earn money for the gallery, you know, that they probably invested a lot of money and a lot of time into, and are like really taking big risks to do that. So there's friendship in terms of like people will show art from artists that they like and are friends with, but then there's also the sort of real thing of who actually is able to sell art and wanting to showcase artists in their gallery, whether that's a festival gallery or a brick and mortar gallery that they actually will be able to profit from, you know?
This is kind of a question, because it's something that as you get into the galleries, you're going to realize that, they're a money-making business, just as Jake said. And with that, when you show your art, they can take a 30% all the way to 50%, and that's not unusual. And maybe sometimes if you're in a bigger gallery in, say, Manhattan or London, they might even take 60%. So I would love to hear each person's process with, like, you know, because it does kind of suck if you have a normal range of what you'd sell a painting for, and then that getting cut 60%. But at the same time, up leveraging the cost of a painting 60% just for the gallery. And it's like, oh, if you normally sell paintings at $5,000 and then all of a sudden you're trying to hang one for $12,000, that's a challenging formula. So I'd love to just hear everyone's opinion on that game.
I have at times, depending on the scenario, I've up leveled my price based on what would feasibly be sold in that gallery. You know, if it's like into a public arena that spends much more money, then, you know, I would consider that. Also, I would work things out, the percentage based on what effort they're putting in to the situation. If it's all out of my hands and they're attracting all the big buyers and they do all that work, then 50%, sure, you know. If I'm bringing clientele, if I'm doing the promotion and a sale happens through me, then it'll be a much smaller percentage. So that's something to consider and work out with them.
Yeah. I'm curious. Anyone else?
I believe so. That shit.
I feel like I have like a set price I do a lot of festivals, and I got really tired of taking my price tags off and like switching the price tag every time. It's so tedious. So I just like upped my prints. I get really quality prints. I really, like Gage said, like quality. And so I just upped my prices and I left it at that price. And I left that on my website as well, just for consistency, you know. So I might be making more money in different areas, less, but it's just for my like just organization, and like I won't make as much money going to festival, but if I if it's like 50%, I will definitely up my prices a lot. But it depends. Like Envision takes 50%, but they sold more of my work than any other festival. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. Yeah.
So I have two questions. One is just something, doesn't have to be the biggest thing, but something that is one of the best investments that you've ever made in your art career, in your art journey for yourself creatively. And the second one's a bit of a brave one, and you can totally pass, but it's more of like a humbling transparency on, I think we established already that time versus like the value of yourself, the value of your artwork, the value of your like social media presence. And there's no rules in terms of everything's all higgledy-piggledy in terms of selling the artwork itself and like what that is priced as. Like Jake said, you can kind of just, it's a made-up thing based on various different things depending on the person. So what's the minimum you've ever charged or like priced something of your work as, and what's the maximum? What's that range for you guys if you're feeling brave enough to answer that one?
The best investment I ever made on my art career was my health, taking care of myself. It's like I really stopped putting a lot of substances, certain ones in my body, started to care like more about my well-being. And then I think my art transmuted through that for sure. And then low. I feel like I must have given a piece away for free at some point. I'm just gonna say free. Intuitively, it feels right. I feel pretty like non-attached to my pieces. I try and keep it that way because I know like prints will come, whatever will come. I like my artwork out in the world. I think it's fun. I want it to get out there. I want it to be amongst my friends, my clients, whatever it may be, my students. And then I think, I don't know, I've done I do murals too. But I think the most I've ever sold a piece for was that self-portrait, honestly. I'm hoping that keeps going. I only started really like selling originals, like ones that are my own work, my own visions. This doesn't count the tray portrait I did when I was like a teenager, like a couple of years ago. So it's like, I'm hoping that just keeps going. Yeah. Making bigger pieces. I'm making like small pieces right now because it feels good. No more than like 24 by 36. That's kind of big, but like I have been making like smaller fun pieces to like keep selling and just with traveling. But yeah, I think that's my range. I'm totally transparent. I'm like all out there.
Yeah, in terms of investments, I'll do tangible investments and then more meta level investments. I think that the best investments I've made for my art career, I use my iPad a lot. That's like one of the best purchases I ever made. Like that's, having a good camera has been nice and a good quality computer. I'd say like those are, and Wacom tablet, those are like tools I use in terms of like investing in tools. And then also my education, I've invested a lot of money into, courses and retreats and workshops and art schools, and definitely investing in my education or books even, has been like the best. And then in terms of, I agree, investing in health is very important. Investing time into meditation has been probably the most beneficial activity that I've ever done in my entire life for everything in my life. So I would say like investing time and attention, awareness, and concentration into a meditation practice is probably the best thing you can do for yourself, period, like all across the board, not just for your art career. So I would say that that's, the best investment I've made just generally. In terms of like works of art, I have probably given away some artworks for free. With original works, I would rarely ever let an original piece go for less than, let's say, like $1,200 at like a very small piece. The most I've ever made on an art sale, I had a contract for around $30,000 a few years ago. That was the most money I've made for the sale of a painting so far. It was a piece I spent a lot of time on over many years, and that was like pretty exciting. And when it happened, I was kind of like I was in sort of like disbelief, where I was like really doubting that this guy was going to be legit with it. And he like gave me a deposit, and I was like, there's no way he's going to like come through with this. But then he actually did. And he maybe had some nefarious sources for that money. So it was like paid in cash and delivered to my dad like in a printer or something, like shipped like inside of like a Cheetos bag in a printer with like wads of cash. And I was like, here's the visionary art scene for you, you know. And my dad had to like somehow like figure out a way to like, you know, deposit the money. And it was like, it was a thing. But yeah, so that's the most I've sold artwork for so far.
Cool. Well, it seems like the two main things have already been mentioned in terms of investments, like health and meditation. But something for me that was a kind of a big game changer was when I decided that I wanted to be an artist, and that was what I felt like all of my energy wanted to be. I took the red pill and I just went all in, and you know, it was just what it was kind of a few years of living in Australia, just pretty poor, but just determined and inspired, and probably some of the best years of my life. Honestly, I was glad that we had an avocado tree growing in the garden, but like, you know, it worked. But just actually, honestly, like from having like some of my friends that are, you know, wealthy or whatever, I remember one of the things that, so a friend of mine shared was that like, actually, if your living costs are lower, that's kind of like a key to sort of bouncing off, you know, like that's a jumping off point kind of thing. I'm not just really explaining that so well, but I'll explain my experience with that. So when I moved to Bali, there was a really big shift in the fact that I could just simply afford the ground under my feet. So, you know, like obviously I'm not saying, oh, everyone needs to move to a third world country or whatever, but I'm just saying like, you know, if you're really determined to, you know, step into, if you're taking the red pill and you're just going all out with just like, yes, this is what I'm supposed to do with my life, just having those foundational aspects that you know that you can like afford and you're not going to be stressing kind of about it, then I feel like that was just really helpful for me, you know, like to be able to afford that patch of land that I get to sleep on each night just kind of like did something to my root chakra, which just set the rest of my system in motion, and abundance literally just started coming in. Like the day that I decided to move to Bali was the day that the next day I sold more paintings than I've ever sold in my life. Like the universe was like, yes. So this is actually coming more from like a kind of energetic sort of space. And I know, of course, like I'm also a firm believer that year kind of encouraged this experiment that I did for a couple of years where I was like, all right, I'm going to that country. I'm going to do that thing. Like I don't have the money, but I'm on like right now in my pocket. But if I just get things in motion and act like it's already happening, then it will. And every single time the universe met me. And I feel like I think if you have a strong visual mind and you're passionate and you just make stuff happen, that's something. But I think the universe just appreciates it when you're on your life path. So, but yeah, in terms of investment, I know it's a bit of a round the houses kind of thing, but like just basically being able to afford the ground that you live on. And if it means like having a bit of a less fancy house, or I don't know, just to get going, that is kind of helpful. But, you know, there's also doing these small acts of just like acting as if you've already got it. So there's this kind of like intuitive balance, I guess. But I think honestly, you're working with the fundamentals. If you can afford your food and your accommodation, then that's a really good starting point. And then you can start playing with the magic with all of the other things. And it's just very interesting dance, I think. Yeah. And in terms of the question around the lowest price point and the highest price point, I mean, I think you sort of shared that in a space that was in a vulnerable container. And like, I'll be honest, I'm like at an interesting point right now where I haven't felt like selling originals, because I feel like there's been this like shift where there was a point in my life where I was selling a lot of paintings, like my deck Beyond the Mirror. I think there's like 56 paintings in there, and all of those paintings have a home, but they were just sold very affordably, you know, like, I don't know, 500, 600 maybe a couple of thousand or whatever. I mean, this was a few years ago now. But then there's this situation where it's important to have the continuity. Like as my art started to get into higher realms of places that it was being shown and buyers were paying more for it, I wanted to keep that consistency. And so there's kind of a bigger jump. And so I'm just kind of like bridging this in-between phase where I don't really feel like I want to just be like selling art that I have a lot of hours in for cheaper. But I'm just kind of like, I know that I'm waiting for the right moment of like this mysterious exhibition that's going to happen. But like my intuition is to just hang in there and just wait a little bit, you know, and find other ways for resourcing my abundance if it comes to it, rather than being like, oh, I'm just going to sell this really cheaply. So yeah, even though I think this is the last thing I'm going to say, is just like the biggest thing I think I'm being on my art journey is like just trusting the bigger picture, you know, like even if the mind's like, oh, you should do this and this, if you're real internal, like something in there is like patience. It's like, combined with the opposite of that as well, which is just like get out there and make it happen. But there's this interesting dance of paradoxes that I think happens when you're an artist anyway. So we'll just fly with that.
Yeah, I think everyone said great things. I can't understate what investing in my education has done for me. I was in a rare circumstance to dedicate a lot of time and resources towards just getting taught. And, you know, it's like y'all got to hang out for 2-3 weeks here with these three, and like what that does to you is so much, just from like skill set you learn, the knowledge here, but just in the frequency of like people you looked up to, you're now sharing meals with. And like the artists that were once someone that was like, oh my God, is like, that's my friend. Like I share meals with them. And I think that has been super important for my journey. And then also like as basic as like, I like buying nice brushes because nice brushes stay. I buy nice oil paint because it is a high pigment count and I actually use less of it. My iPad, I take photos and I use Procreate because I can figure it out on a paint on like the digital space instead of looking at it and working out on a canvas and spending more time. It does lose some of the magic, and there's me and her can talk endlessly about the planning versus not planning and waking up. So there's a balance with it all, but I think there's also a really big part of my journey. I think it's one of the more mystifying things, but everyone here will be like, the spiritual side is such a correlation to the money side, to what can come out to the art side of like, you know, it's like how I treat my day, how I treat myself, like Luke's thing about like letting go and the like perfection and your whole life not weighing on each brushstroke for this painting to be the next big thing. Like, fuck, I spent like 3 years trying to get over that stuff, and it's still a battle, you know? And I think just like how I choose to set up my life and my day of like, okay, I go to yoga, or like I eat these healthy foods, or all these things about setting myself up to be in an optimum space. And then also investing in spiritual education, like me getting to like, there was a point where like I started doing certain breath work, and like my relationship of 5 years was fading away. My house flooded, which I'm in Colorado, houses don't flood there, and it was covered in mold. And then I was going to maybe quit doing art because I needed to pay for a baby that I didn't want to have. I mean, like, we weren't pregnant, but just the conversations were there, and I didn't want a child. And I was going to like waking up with anxiety attacks about how to pay for this family that I didn't want to support, or like I didn't want to do, and how I would have to get another job and all this stuff. And I went and did some meditation retreats at like with Joe Dispenza. Look him up. His shit's awesome. But it really just reminded me that I'm the creator of my life. And like, if I start living in this state of abundance, and if I like actively give what I can give and show up for people, and, you know, like it doesn't make sense to rent a Lamborghini, but like if I can tip the Gojek driver a little bit extra, you know, if I can like buy my friend a meal even when I don't really feel comfortable doing it, all these little acts go into it. And then like, since I've changed my perspective around money and my emotional relationship to it, my income is double, triple, quadruple folded. And I can't overstate the like psychedelic Jedi consciousness aspect of like, I sit down every morning, like since I've been traveling, it's not been as good, but for 3 years I sat down, or 2 years, I sat down every morning I do breath work for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I do some silent meditation, and then I'd literally sit and listen to this audio thing that was me tapping into what it feels like of Gage being abundant. And like, not only like me getting to have a house I own, but like what it's like to like, okay, I love being able to travel the world and make art. Like, what if I have so much money that I get to start a program to fund artists to do that? And how much joy is it that I'm like, yo, here's 10 stacks, go travel for 3 months. I want to see what you pay when you come back. And the joy that brings me every day. And I start my day with like, I'm Gucci. I got this house coming in. I'm like supporting artists. Like, I'm doing all this stuff. Like, then I start acting from that place during my day. And it doesn't have to be these big gestures, but these little moments of not being in lack and being in fear and being like, I am in my power, I think goes in such a long way to the universe to making art happen. And like, once that I like got deeper into practice, it was like $7,000 mural came, $9,000 painting sale at Maps, $11,000 commission came in. When I was on the road traveling and funds were getting lower, it was like, we want you to illustrate a book, one of my collectors. And I was like, it's not normally something I'll do, but I did it. And it was like, cool, that's like almost 15 grand right there. And so it's just like all these little nuggets adding up, are like big nuggets actually. And I'm like, damn, those are some stacks, like cool. And like my previous years were thin. It was like me not going out to events unless I was working them and being in slightly fear consciousness. And like that shit will take you nowhere, and it sucks, and it's not fun. It's not the version of me that people like around in their space either. So, yeah, there's that.
Right on. That's very, very resonant. I mean, so much of what's being shared here is, I feel like I could say the same thing. I feel like the big investment for me really is my relationships with my body and my physicality and all the contributions to just feeling the best I can feel as often as possible for as long as possible is like, you know, the residual effect of that just trickles into all levels of perception and all forms of action. Being a reflection and a byproduct is just like feeling really grounded and embodied and strong and healthy and vibrantly alive. And it's like, whatever I do is that presented into the world, and such incredible, miraculous realities I experience are related to that. And so I feel the reflection of the imperative importance of that, and what food I eat, how I treat my body, the sleep I get, the environment I choose to be in, and the life-affirming, co-creative dreaming agents I like to be surrounded by that point at a life well lived. And all of these things, these are all investments, and it's all a part of the bigger picture of living abundantly and thriving, in all forms. And there was a time in 2015 I had an exhibition in Oakland, and I brought so much work there, sculptures, original paintings. It was a big solo show, and I was making some great connections. I was also feeling the time closing where it was all going to come down and I was going to have to come back to Bali, and just feeling like an everything must go sale. And I sold work that was really deeply meaningful for me, that had traveled to all these countries and were infused with so much intention and rich experience was embedded into it. And part of me just like feeling the sting of like having to let this go to characters that just want something to match the couch, not necessarily feeling the level of, symbol rich meaning infused in it. They just like the color palette and just like, all right, I gotta let this go. And just feeling like maybe it would have been better to hold on to it and have it go towards someone that really feels it. And I also know that, this work needs to go where it needs to go, and there's a magical impact that I can't necessarily see or chronicle, but it's out there now, and it's doing its work, it's having its effect. But then I was leaving the US and feeling like, wow, okay, well, I made more money than had I just sold the ones that I wanted to sell for the price that they were worth. I ended up, walking out with a lot more, but then feeling like, how am I going to leave the US with this much stacks of paper. That's like a bit of a, that's a red flag to just like drop this into an account. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just buy Bitcoin because it's, 5,000 a coin. I can just put it in there, and then I'll have it on my phone when I arrive wherever I'm going to arrive. Then I can just withdraw it, which I never did. And it was like, I got 12 Bitcoins out of it. And then with all the ups and downs and all the turmoil and all the revelation, everything of that, it really altered my perception of just like, I'm abundant. Oh, no, I'm not. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. Oh, I am the abundance that I'm seeking. It's just like this consensually agreed upon illusion that everybody's putting their attention on that's determining whether I'm abundant or not. And so it had this really profound effect of just like altering something really deep in the nucleus of my being of what abundance is. It's like, it's not, it's not these digits. It's a state of being, and it's a state of consciousness. And then seeing how that affected my life and how, like, what that attracted into my world, I saw the correlation there of just like, I'm thriving, I'm abundant. And it came in the form of more sales and more connections and more value put on my work and more acceptance of that value. And, just really, it shifted something really fundamental in my imagination of myself that then played itself out into my waking world. And so, yeah, that was a big event for me.
Go Bitcoin.
I have to digit quite a bit since they supposedly didn't take for capacity.
Yeah, I think of abundance as being a quality of generosity. It's like, it doesn't have to do with money. I've met many rich people who are not abundant. It has to do with feeling like you have something to contribute to others and something to give. That can be just purely energetic. That can be emotional. That can be supportive. That can be creative. That doesn't have anything to do with money necessarily, and yeah, it's like I've had to transcend a lot of those programs around money because I grew up in a family that valued money in a way that didn't feel healthy to me, and that there was a lot of fear and a lot of attachment and a lot of self-identity wrapped up in the having of money. And that was something I really rebelled against. It was like, well, I'm just going to be a broke-ass hippie, so like I don't subscribe to these values and fuck capitalism. And like, it's taken a lot of rewiring to be like, oh, hey, it's okay to have money. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean I'm materialistic, selfish, shallow. And also meeting people like through Burning Man festival communities and sort of the art world that were people that were even billionaires who were really exceptional characters doing a lot with their money to help other people and to contribute towards creating things that were really, life affirming and extraordinary. Like, it gave me a whole new orientation to, what that can mean. And if you do have a lot of money and a lot of resources, you have the potential to be able to offer a lot on behalf of other people and be more generous and contribute more creativity to the world. So yeah, it's been a big shift for me in terms of looking at money more as just a resource that I can use, and I can use it to create something positive rather than like, oh, this defines who I am, and if I don't have it, I'm a loser and whatever, which is like a lot of the kind of like toxic values I was like brought up in American society that I had to really work to transcend.
Indeed.
All right, we feeling good? All right, food's ready. All right, thanks guys.
Thank you for tuning in to the podcast. I am the DFT Elf. Escaping into your dimension. New episodes of the Creativity and Consciousness podcast drop each week. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to stay connected and join a like-minded community, hop in the Telegram group where we discuss the latest episodes and ideas they spark. Sending you instant love and gratitude for being part of this journey.